My hands were shaking as I poured coffee into the chipped ceramic mug. Not from nerves exactly, but from the exhaustion that had become my constant companion over these past 2 years. 3 double shifts that week alone, and it was only Thursday morning. The fluorescent lights of Ruby's diner buzzed overhead with that irritating hum I'd learned to tune out, casting their sickly yellow glow over everything. The cracked vinyl booths, the worn linoleum floor, the faces of customers who looked as tired as I felt. I caught my reflection in the stainless steel coffee pot, dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide anymore, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that had seen better days, better weeks, better years. The breakfast rush was finally dying down when he walked in. I almost missed him at first, this elderly gentleman in a thick wool coat, despite the mild September weather outside. The morning sun was streaming through the diner's front windows, promising a beautiful day, but he was dressed for winter. He moved slowly, carefully, like each step required deep concentration and planning. His face was deeply weathered, but somehow kind, with lines etched into his skin that spoke of decades of laughter, worry, contemplation. Lines that told stories I'd never hear. He chose the corner booth, the one with the slightly torn vinyl seat that we kept meaning to fix, but never got around to because there was always something more urgent, demanding attention. I grabbed a laminated menu from the stack by the register and headed over, trying desperately to summon the energy to be pleasant, to smile, to pretend I wasn't completely falling apart inside. That was the job, after all. Smile, take orders, bring food, collect tips, pretend you're not dying a little more each day. Repeat until your feet feel like they're going to fall off, until your back is screaming, until you can't remember what it felt like to not be exhausted down to your bones. Jessica speaking. Good morning. Can I start you off with some coffee? He looked up at me with these pale blue eyes that seemed to see right through my practiced cheerfulness, past the fake smile and the automatic greeting, straight into the exhaustion and desperation I was trying so hard to hide. Theodore speaking. That would be lovely, dear. Thank you so much. His voice was soft, cultivated, the kind of accent that suggested old money or at least a very good education somewhere along the line. Maybe East Coast prep schools and Ivy League colleges. Not the typical customer at Ruby's Diner, which catered mostly to truckers stopping for fuel and food, construction workers grabbing breakfast before heading to job sites, and people who couldn't afford anything fancier than a $5 breakfast special. People like me, essentially, during my increasingly rare off hours when I had the energy to eat it all. I brought the coffee back, my hands steadier now that I had something concrete to focus on, and he ordered simple. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, no butter please. Nothing fancy, nothing demanding. But something about him made me pause, made me actually look at him instead of just processing him as another order to take, another table to serve. Maybe it was the way he thanked me, like he actually meant it, like my presence mattered somehow. Or maybe it was just that he looked so utterly alone, sitting in that corner booth with his careful posture and his slightly trembling hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it was providing warmth he desperately needed. The morning wore on in its familiar rhythm. I took orders from a table of construction workers who were loud and friendly and tipped decently. Delivered plates of pancakes and hash browns and eggs cooked every way imaginable. Refilled coffee cups until the pot needed brewing again. Wiped down tables that customers had just vacated, clearing away the debris of their meals, their newspapers, their brief stops in my world. My feet ached in the cheap shoes I'd bought at a discount store because I couldn't afford anything better. My lower back sent little shooting pains up my spine every time I bent to wipe down a table, a reminder of all the years I'd spent doing physical labor my body wasn't designed for. I was 28 years old, and I felt ancient, decrepit, used up. This wasn't how life was supposed to turn out, was it? Not according to the dreams I'd had 10 years ago, sitting in my college dorm room with my roommate, planning a future that had seemed so bright and full of possibility back then. But then my mother got sick. Cancer, the aggressive kind that eats away at everything, including your savings, your hope, your ability to plan for anything beyond the next doctor's appointment. I'd dropped out of my junior year to take care of her, moved back home to the tiny apartment we'd shared when I was growing up. By the time she died 2 years later, after months of brutal treatments that didn't work and hospital bills that never stopped coming, I had nothing left. No degree, no savings, no career prospects. Just debt that felt like it would crush me, grief that made it hard to breathe some days, and a job at Ruby's Diner that barely covered my rent on a studio apartment that was somehow even smaller than the one I'd grown up in. I was clearing a nearby table, scraping congealed eggs into the bus tub, when I heard the old man call out softly, his voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes and conversation. Theodore speaking. Miss, could I trouble you for some more coffee when you have a moment? Jessica speaking. Of course, absolutely. Is everything all right with your meal? You've barely touched it. He glanced down at his plate like he'd forgotten it was there, like the scrambled eggs had materialized without his knowledge or consent. Theodore speaking. Oh, it's fine. Excellent, actually. Really very good. I'm just not as hungry as I thought I would be. That happens sometimes at my age. You look tired, if you don't mind my saying so. I let out a laugh that came out more bitter than I'd intended, harsher than appropriate for a conversation with a customer. Jessica speaking. That obvious, huh? I guess I need to work on my game face. Theodore speaking. I raised 3 daughters, you see. I recognize that particular kind of exhaustion. Too many responsibilities. Not enough hours in the day. Not enough help from the world. Not enough of anything, really. The weight of trying to hold everything together when the pieces keep slipping through your fingers. Something about the kindness in his voice, the genuine empathy in those pale blue eyes, made my throat suddenly tight. I blinked hard, fighting back tears that had no business appearing during my shift. I couldn't afford to break down in the middle of Ruby's diner, not in front of customers, not in front of Rita, who was already worried about me, not in front of myself. Jessica speaking. Yeah, well, that's life, isn't it? That's just how things are sometimes. He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful and sad. Theodore speaking. Sometimes it is, but not always, and certainly not forever. Things change, dear. Sometimes they change in ways we can't imagine. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Before I could respond, before I could process what he meant by that, another customer flagged me down from across the diner, waving his empty coffee cup in the air like a flag. I excused myself and got pulled back into the relentless rhythm of the shift. Take order, deliver food, clear plates, smile, repeat. But I found myself glancing over at the old man's table periodically throughout the morning. He sat there for nearly 2 hours, nursing that single cup of coffee, occasionally taking a small bite of his breakfast, mostly just watching the diner's activity with quiet, almost meditative interest, like he was studying us, trying to memorize every detail, every interaction, every moment. Finally, around 10:30, he stood up slowly, carefully, leaving some cash on the table in a neat stack. I was helping another customer, explaining for the 3rd time that yes, we were out of the blueberry muffins, when I heard him call out a soft goodbye to no one in particular. I turned and waved, watched him make his careful way to the door, one hand on the booth backs for support, moving like someone who knew every step might be his last. Such a sweet old man, I thought. I hoped someone was taking care of him, wherever he was going. I hoped he wasn't as alone as he seemed. It wasn't until about 15 minutes later, after I'd cleared 2 other tables and was finally getting to his, that I saw the cash. It was there, neatly folded, tucked under his coffee cup. I picked it up absently to count it, expecting maybe $10 or $15 for a meal that had cost $7 and change. The bills felt crisp and new in my fingers, and then my heart nearly stopped beating because this had to be a mistake. It had to be. People didn't just leave this kind of money on diner tables. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the bills as I counted them once. Then again. Then a 3rd time, certain I was seeing things wrong. That exhaustion had finally made me delusional. $100,000. The bills were crisp and new, still in their original bands from the bank, organized in neat stacks of hundreds. $100,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my entire life. More money than I'd make in 3 years working at this diner, even with every possible shift. More money than all of my mother's medical bills combined. More money than my student loans from the 2 years I'd completed before dropping out. More money than hope itself. More money than dreams. More money than I could even conceptualize as something real and tangible that I could hold in my hands. I stood there, completely frozen, holding what felt like someone's entire life savings in my shaking hands. This couldn't be right. This couldn't possibly be intentional. He must have made a terrible mistake. Maybe he'd grabbed the wrong envelope from his car, meant to leave a $20 bill and accidentally grabbed his entire bank withdrawal. Maybe he was confused. Maybe he had dementia. Maybe he didn't realize what he was doing. I had to find him, had to give it back before he got home and realized what had happened and panicked. I shoved the money deep into my apron pocket, my hands still trembling, and ran for the door. The cool September air hit my face as I burst into the parking lot. It was mostly empty now, the breakfast crowd long gone, but I could see him walking slowly toward an old but well-maintained sedan parked in the far corner. His gait was unsteady, careful, each step deliberate. Jessica speaking. Sir, please wait. You left this. He turned slowly, his expression placid and calm and completely unsurprised to see me running after him with panic in my voice and tears already forming in my eyes. Jessica speaking. You left this on the table. This has to be a mistake. You can't just give someone this much money. It's not right. Something's wrong here. You need to take it back. Please. He smiled at me, such a gentle, sad smile that seemed to carry the weight of years of regret and lost opportunities. Theodore speaking. It's not a mistake, dear. I promise you, it's exactly what I intended to do. Exactly what I planned. Jessica speaking. But why? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I'm just a waitress at a diner. You can't just give random people this kind of money. What about your family? What about your children? They'll think I stole it. They'll think I did something to you. Theodore speaking. I can do whatever I choose with my money, and I choose to give it to someone who looks like they could use a bit of hope. Someone who's been carrying too much for too long. Someone who deserves a chance, whether they believe that or not. My eyes were burning now, tears threatening to spill over no matter how hard I tried to hold them back. Jessica speaking. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's way too much. What about your family? What about your children? What will they think? Theodore speaking. My children are well provided for, I assure you. Trust me when I say they won't want for anything. They have substantial trust funds, investments, properties. They're all quite successful in their own right. But you, what's your name, dear? Jessica speaking. Jessica. Jessica Chen. Theodore speaking. Jessica. Such a lovely name. You remind me so much of my youngest daughter when she was about your age. That same tired determination. That same way of trying so hard to keep everything together while the world keeps falling apart around you. I couldn't help her then, you see. I was too wrapped up in my work, my business deals, my ambitions. Too busy building an empire to notice my family crumbling. But I can help you now. Please, let an old man ease his conscience a little. Let me do something right at the end. Jessica speaking. I don't understand any of this. Why me? Why today? He reached out with both hands and gently closed my fingers around the money. His hands were cool and dry, trembling slightly, but his grip surprisingly firm. Theodore speaking. You don't need to understand everything right now. You just need to accept it. Use it wisely. Use it to build the life you deserve, the life you should have had all along. Promise me that. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I was crying openly now. Couldn't help it. Didn't even try to stop the tears anymore. Jessica speaking. I promise I'll use it well. But sir, please, I don't even know your name. I need to know your name. Theodore speaking. That's all right. It doesn't really matter who I am. What matters is that you take care of yourself, Jessica Chen. Stop running yourself into the ground. Stop sacrificing everything for survival. Life is too short and too precious to spend it exhausted and hopeless. You deserve better than what you've had. You deserve joy and rest and the chance to dream again. Promise me you'll remember that. Jessica speaking. I will. I promise. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you enough. Theodore speaking. You just did. Now go. Go build something beautiful with your life. He got into his car slowly, carefully, and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot of Ruby's Diner, clutching more money than I'd ever dreamed of having, tears streaming down my face, my whole body shaking with emotions I couldn't begin to name or understand. The morning sun was warm on my face, and suddenly the whole world felt different, like something fundamental had shifted in ways I couldn't quite comprehend yet. The rest of my shift passed in a complete daze. I couldn't think straight, couldn't focus on anything. I kept making mistakes, forgetting orders, bringing the wrong items to tables. Every time I touched my apron pocket, I felt the substantial bulk of those bills, and wondered if I was dreaming, if this was some kind of exhaustion-induced hallucination brought on by too many double shifts and not enough sleep. Maybe I'd fallen asleep during my break, and this was all some desperate fantasy my mind had created to give me hope. But the money was real. When I finally got home to my tiny studio apartment after my shift ended at 3, I locked the door behind me with shaking hands and counted it again on my kitchen table, which was really just a folding card table I'd bought at a garage sale for $10. The apartment was so small that you could stand in the center and almost touch both walls. The paint was peeling in the corners, the carpet was stained in places I couldn't clean no matter how hard I tried, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. But it was mine. or at least I paid rent for it. And right now it felt like the most important place in the world because this is where I was discovering that miracles might actually be real. $100,000. Real, legal tender, actual bills I could hold and count and touch. A miracle wrapped in crisp $100 bills, each one representing possibilities I'd stopped letting myself imagine years ago. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind raced with possibilities that felt simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. I could pay off my student loans from the 2 years of college I'd completed before dropping out. That was about $35,000 right there. I could fix my car that made that terrible grinding noise whenever I went above 40 miles per hour. The noise I'd been ignoring for months because I couldn't afford to take it to a mechanic. I could maybe, possibly, dare to dream bigger than just survival, bigger than just making rent and eating enough to function. Maybe I could finish my degree, finally get that diploma I'd been so close to earning before my mother got sick. Maybe I could start that graphic design business I'd always wanted, the dream I'd had before reality crushed it under the weight of medical bills and funeral costs, and the simple brutality of trying to survive. Maybe I could breathe for the first time in years, actually breathe without feeling like I was suffocating under the weight of everything I'd lost and everything I'd never have. But underneath all the excitement and possibility was a gnawing anxiety that kept me awake even when exhaustion pulled at me. What if there was a catch I hadn't seen? What if this was illegal somehow, some kind of money laundering scheme, and I was now an unwitting accomplice? What if he showed up tomorrow asking for it back, saying he'd changed his mind? What if his family came looking for it, accusing me of taking advantage of a confused old man? The money felt like both a blessing and a burden, this impossible gift that might somehow turn into a curse that would destroy what little stability I'd managed to build. The next morning, Friday, I dragged myself to my shift at the diner, despite having gotten maybe 3 hours of fitful sleep. I'd hidden the money in my apartment, tucked inside an empty cereal box in my cupboard because I didn't have a safe, and putting it in the bank seemed premature and risky. What if I had to give it back? What if there were questions I couldn't answer? What if this all fell apart? I was halfway through the breakfast rush, my body moving on autopilot while my mind spun in endless circles, when Rita came out from her cramped office looking perplexed and slightly concerned. Rita speaking. "Jessica, honey? There's a phone call for you. Some lawyer wanting to speak with you. Says it's urgent." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick right there. This was it. I knew it. I knew it was too good to be true. They were going to accuse me of stealing it, of manipulating a vulnerable old man, or tell me it was all a mistake and I had to return it immediately, or worse, so much worse. With shaking hands that I couldn't quite control, I followed Rita to her office and picked up the phone. My voice came out as barely a whisper. Jessica speaking. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was professional, crisp, efficient. A man's voice, educated, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who was used to being listened to. Michael Harrington speaking. "Ms. Jessica Chen?" Jessica speaking. "Yes, that's me." Michael Harrington speaking. "My name is Michael Harrington. I'm an attorney with Harrington and Associates here in the city. I'm calling regarding Mr. Theodore Blackwell. He was a client of mine for many years. The name meant nothing to me. I knew I'd never heard it before in my life." Jessica speaking. "I'm sorry, but I don't know anyone by that name." Michael Harrington speaking. "Mr. Blackwell was a client of mine for over 20 years. He passed away yesterday evening at approximately 7:30 p.m. at Mercy Hospital. His family was with him at the end." The world tilted sideways. The old man, the kind old man with the pale blue eyes and the gentle smile who'd given me that impossible tip just yesterday morning. Dead. Gone. Just hours after sitting in my section at Ruby's Diner, drinking coffee and telling me to take care of myself, telling me my life could be different. He'd known. He must have known he was dying, must have known it was his last day, and he'd spent part of it giving me hope. Jessica speaking. "I don't understand. Why are you calling me?" Michael Harrington speaking. "Mr. Blackwell came to my office yesterday morning around 9 a.m. and revised his will. He made several changes, but most significantly, he specifically asked me to contact you in the event of his death, which, given his medical condition, he knew was imminent. He'd been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 3 months ago. According to his oncologist, he had perhaps 3 or 4 weeks left at most. But he declined further treatment, chose hospice care instead. He spent his final day making arrangements, putting his affairs in order." Jessica speaking. "But why would he include me in his will? Why would he even mention me? I only met him yesterday. I served him breakfast once. That's all." Michael Harrington speaking. Yes, well, Mr. Blackwell had a tendency toward grand gestures, particularly near the end of his life. He was quite clear about his intentions. He left you the $100,000 in cash, which I understand he gave you personally yesterday morning at the diner. Additionally, and this is the primary reason I'm calling, he's left you something else. Jessica speaking. Something else? What else could there possibly be? Michael Harrington speaking. His primary residence. A brownstone in the historic district downtown, fully paid off. It's been in his family for 3 generations. According to the most recent appraisal, it's worth approximately $1.2 million. He's left it to you, Ms. Chen. The house, the property, everything inside it. It's yours. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was hearing. This wasn't real. This couldn't possibly be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like me. This was a dream or a mistake or some kind of elaborate scam. Michael Harrington speaking. Ms. Chen, are you still there? Can you hear me? Jessica speaking. Why? Why would he do this? Why would he give me anything at all, let alone a house? A house worth over $1 million? This doesn't make any sense. The lawyer was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his professional tone had softened considerably. Michael Harrington speaking. Mr. Blackwell was a complicated man, Ms. Chen. Brilliant, successful, extraordinarily wealthy. He built a real estate empire from almost nothing, starting with a single property and growing it into something remarkable. But he was also haunted by regrets, particularly regarding his family. He neglected his wife and daughters in pursuit of success. He missed birthdays, school plays, graduations, weddings. He was always working, always focused on the next deal, the next acquisition. His wife passed away 10 years ago, and his daughters, all 3 of them, they've been estranged from him for years. They've made it very clear they don't want his money or his apologies or his attempts at reconciliation. It's too late for that, they've told him repeatedly. He's left them substantial trust funds, of course, but they've indicated they plan to donate most of it to charity. I think in you he saw a chance at redemption, however small. A chance to actually help someone who truly needed help. No strings attached, no expectations, no demands. A way to matter in his final hours, to make a difference in someone's life in a way he never managed with his own family. Jessica speaking. This can't be legal. His daughters could contest it. They'll fight this. They have to. Michael Harrington speaking. They won't. I've already contacted all 3 of them and informed them of the provisions in the revised will. They have absolutely no interest in fighting this, Ms. Chen. Frankly, I think they're relieved that their father found some measure of peace at the end, some way to feel like he'd done something good with his life and his wealth. The eldest daughter, Elizabeth, she said to tell you that she hopes you build something beautiful with what he's given you. Those were her exact words. After hanging up the phone, I stood in Rita's cramped office for a long moment, just staring at nothing, my hand still resting on the receiver. My entire life had just changed in the span of a 5-minute phone conversation. I had a house. A house. Not an apartment, not a rental, but an actual house in the historic district downtown, one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the entire city. A house with a real address and probably a yard and multiple rooms and a history spanning 3 generations. And $100,000 in cash hidden in a cereal box in my pathetic studio apartment. And suddenly, the crushing weight that had been pressing down on my chest for years, making it hard to breathe, making every day feel like a struggle just to survive, began to lift. Not all at once, not completely, but enough that I could take a deep breath and feel it fill my lungs completely for the first time in forever. But with the lifting came something unexpected and almost more frightening than the weight had been. Terror. Absolute, paralyzing terror. What did I do now? How did I handle this kind of responsibility? I'd spent so long just surviving, just getting through each day, that I'd forgotten how to actually live, how to plan for anything beyond next week's rent and this month's electric bill. The money, the house, they were wonderful, miraculous even, like something from a fairy tale. But they also represented a massive responsibility, an obligation to this stranger who'd given me everything and expected nothing in return except that I use it well. I couldn't mess this up. I couldn't squander this incredible, impossible gift. But what if I did? What if I wasn't capable of handling it? What if Theodore Blackwell had made a terrible mistake in choosing me? I quit Ruby's that day. I gave Rita 2 weeks' notice because that seemed like the right thing to do, but she told me not to worry about it, told me to go take care of this amazing opportunity that had fallen into my lap. Rita was like that, generous and kind even when it cost her something. She hugged me tight, tears in her own eyes, told me she was proud of me even though she didn't know what there was to be proud of yet. My co-workers, the other servers who'd become my only social circle over these past 2 years, they threw me an impromptu goodbye party during the afternoon lull. Just some store-bought cake and cheap coffee, but they were genuinely happy for me, and I cried through the whole thing because these people had been my family when I had no one else. Leaving them felt like abandoning something essential, something I'd need again someday, even though I knew intellectually that I was moving towards something infinitely better. The next few weeks were a complete blur of paperwork and meetings and learning things I'd never needed to know before. Meetings with lawyers who explained inheritance law in terms I barely understood. Meetings with financial advisors who talked about tax implications and investment strategies and long-term financial planning. Meetings with real estate agents who walked me through the brownstone and pointed out features I'd never even considered important. Mr. Harrington walked me through everything with remarkable patience, never making me feel stupid for asking basic questions, helping me understand the complexities of suddenly having wealth when I'd never had anything before. The brownstone was absolutely beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. A 3-story Victorian with original hardwood floors that creaked in places, but were still gorgeous, with crown molding and high ceilings and windows that let in so much natural light I had to squint the first time I walked through. There was a garden out back, overgrown and neglected but full of potential, with rose bushes that probably just needed pruning, and a small fountain that could probably be fixed. It needed work, certainly. Some rooms needed painting. The kitchen appliances were old and probably needed replacing. The bathrooms could use updating. But it was structurally sound, solid, real, and it was mine. Legally, officially mine. My name on the deed, my responsibility, my home. I moved in on a Tuesday in early October, when the leaves were just starting to turn, and the air had that crisp quality that promised autumn was truly here. I'd hired movers to bring my meager belongings from the studio apartment, which only took them about 45 minutes because I owned almost nothing. A bed, a table, a few dishes, some clothes, a box of photos and mementos from my mother. That was it. That was everything I owned after 28 years of living. Walking through those empty rooms of the brownstone, I kept expecting someone to appear and tell me there'd been a mistake, that I had to leave, that this wasn't really mine after all. But no one did. This was my house, my home. I set up my belongings in one of the 4 bedrooms, choosing the smallest one because the larger ones felt too overwhelming, and looked around at all that empty space stretching out around me. What was I going to do with 4 bedrooms? With a formal dining room big enough to seat 12 people? With a library that had built-in bookshelves floor to ceiling but no books to fill them? That's when the doubt really set in, settling over me like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. I'd been given this incredible gift, this opportunity that most people could never even dream of, but what if I wasn't worthy of it? What if I squandered it through ignorance or fear or simple inability to rise to the occasion? What if Theodore Blackwell had made a terrible mistake in choosing me, in trusting me with his legacy? What if I failed him, failed myself, failed everyone who might have benefited from this going to someone more capable? I spent the first few nights in that big house feeling small and lost and completely overwhelmed. The house made sounds at night, settling and creaking in ways my studio apartment never had. Every noise made me jump, made me aware of how alone I was, how isolated, how completely out of my depth. I'd lie awake in the massive bed I'd bought because my old twin bed seemed ridiculous in a bedroom that size, listen to the old house settle around me, and wonder what I was supposed to do now. Survival had been my only goal for so long, the only thing I knew how to focus on. That actual opportunity, actual freedom to choose my own path, felt foreign and frightening and almost paralyzing. My phone became my lifeline during those uncertain weeks of October as I tried to figure out my next move. I'd lie in bed at 2 a.m, unable to sleep, scrolling through job postings, educational programs, business ideas, anything and everything that might give myself direction and purpose. But every option felt simultaneously possible and impossible, like I could do anything but that somehow made it harder to choose something specific. If I could do anything, how did I know what the right thing was? How did I know what would honor Theodore's gift and his faith in me? Then one night, alone in that big empty house while rain pattered against the windows, I found myself going through my old portfolio from college. I'd kept it all these years, stored in a cardboard box in the back of various closets, never quite able to throw it away even when keeping it felt pointless. Graphic design work mostly, projects I'd been passionate about and proud of before life had derailed everything. Logos for imaginary companies, posters for fake events, website mock-ups that existed only in my imagination. I'd been good at this, had real talent according to my professors. They'd encouraged me to pursue it professionally, told me I had a future in design if I wanted it. But it had felt like an indulgence when my mother was dying, when bills were piling up, when survival was the only thing that mattered. Art didn't pay the bills, I'd told myself over and over. Practical work did. Waitressing paid the bills. Suffering paid the bills. Dreams were luxuries I couldn't afford. But now, sitting in my library, surrounded by empty bookshelves, looking at these old projects that still sparked something inside me, I realized that practical wasn't the only option anymore. I had resources now. Real resources. I had time because I wasn't working 3 double shifts a week just to make rent. I had space, literal physical space and mental space and emotional space. And suddenly, that old dream of starting my own design business, of creating things that were beautiful and meaningful, didn't seem quite so impossible, quite so far out of reach. The decision, once I finally made it after weeks of agonizing and second-guessing, brought a rush of both excitement and terror in equal measure. I enrolled in online courses to update my skills because design software had changed significantly in the 6 years since I'd dropped out. I set up a home office in one of the spare bedrooms, buying a good computer and a proper desk and all the equipment I'd need. I created a website, spent hours getting every detail right, building a portfolio from my old work and new projects I created specifically to showcase my current abilities. I reached out to former classmates and professors, tentatively, nervously, explaining where I'd been and what I was trying to do now. Each step forward felt like walking on ice, uncertain and precarious, like at any moment it might all crack beneath me and I'd fall through into freezing water. But it was also exhilarating in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible, this feeling of working towards something I actually wanted, instead of just working to survive. My first client came through a former professor who remembered me and took pity on my situation, a small nonprofit that needed a logo redesign for their annual fundraising campaign. They paid me $300, which wasn't much by professional standards but felt like a fortune to me. I nearly cried when the payment came through to my new business account, not because I needed the money, but because of what it represented. Validation. Proof that I could do this, that my work had value beyond just what I thought of it. Someone had looked at what I created and decided it was worth paying for. That meant everything. But then came the inevitable dry spell that every freelancer experiences, but no one warns you about adequately. Weeks would pass without any new inquiries, let alone actual clients. I'd refresh my email constantly, obsessively, looking for messages that never came. I'd check my website analytics, watching the numbers tick up slowly as people visited but never contacted me. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I'd made a huge mistake, if I should just give up and find a regular job, something safe and predictable even if it meant abandoning this dream again. The money Theodore left me meant I didn't have to panic about rent or food or basic survival, which should have been a relief, but somehow made everything harder. Because now I had no external pressure forcing me to persist, no desperation driving me forward. I could quit any time. I could give up, walk away, admit defeat, find another waitressing job somewhere, play it safe, stop trying to be something more than I'd ever been. That option, that escape hatch, made every moment of doubt feel heavier, more significant, more like a referendum on my entire worth as a person. Those weeks tested me in ways I hadn't anticipated, ways that were completely different from the physical exhaustion of working at Ruby's, but somehow equally brutal. It's one thing to fail when you have no choice but to keep trying, when stopping means homelessness or hunger or complete collapse. Desperation has its own kind of momentum. It's another thing entirely to choose to keep trying when giving up is a perfectly valid option, when no one would blame you for taking the safer path. Every morning, I had to wake up and actively decide to believe in myself, to believe that I was worth Theodore's faith and his gift, to believe that I could build something meaningful instead of just surviving. And some mornings, honestly, that decision felt impossible to make. I started attending networking events around the city, forcing myself to go even when every fiber of my being wanted to stay home where it was safe. Small business mixers, design meetups, entrepreneurship workshops. The first event I attended was a disaster. I stood in the corner for an hour, nursing the same glass of water, watching everyone else network with what seemed like effortless confidence. I tried to introduce myself to a few people, but my voice came out shaky and uncertain. When someone asked what I did, I found myself stumbling over the words, unable to call myself a designer without it feeling like a lie. Jessica speaking. I'm trying to start a design business. Freelance. I'm kind of new at this. The person I was talking to, a woman in an expensive suit, nodded politely and excused herself almost immediately. I left that first event after 90 minutes, went home, and cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could bring myself to drive. This was impossible. I wasn't cut out for this. I should just give up now before I embarrassed myself further. But the next week, I made myself go to another event, and then another. Each time was slightly less painful than the last, though it never became easy. I'd stand in rooms full of confident people who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. People who could talk about their businesses and their accomplishments without hesitation or self-doubt. And I'd force myself to engage even though social situations exhausted me in ways that physical labor never had. I joined online communities for designers and entrepreneurs, participated in discussions even when I felt like an imposter, asked for advice from people who seemed to have it all figured out. I volunteered my services to small businesses and charities who couldn't afford professional design work, building my portfolio one project at a time. A coffee shop that needed a new menu board, a community garden that wanted better signage, a women's shelter that needed brochures for their fundraising efforts. The work didn't pay, but each completed project was proof that I could do this, that my skills had value. Each interaction felt like pulling teeth at first, awkward and painful and requiring enormous effort that left me drained for days afterward. I'd rehearse conversations in my head before events, practice how I'd introduce myself, prepare answers to common questions. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, it got easier. The words came more naturally. I got better at talking about my work without apologizing for it, at selling myself without feeling like a fraud, at believing I had something valuable to offer the world. The transformation was so slow, I barely noticed it happening, until one day I realized I'd just had an entire conversation about my business, without once feeling like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. One evening, about 4 months after Theodore's death, in early February when winter had settled in hard and cold, I found myself at a local business mixer I'd almost skipped. I'd been feeling tired and discouraged after another day of rejected proposals and ignored emails. The mixer was at a trendy downtown venue I never would have been able to afford to enter before, and I'd spent 20 minutes sitting in my car in the parking lot trying to convince myself to actually go inside instead of just driving home to my big empty house and my comfortable bed and my familiar self-doubt. But I'd promised myself I'd attend, and if nothing else, I was trying to be someone who kept promises, especially promises to myself. So I went in, got a name tag, accepted a glass of wine I was too nervous to actually drink, and tried to look like I belonged there among all these successful people in their nice clothes with their easy confidence. That's where I met Elena Martinez, though I didn't know her name yet. She was across the room, animated and energetic, talking to a small group about something that had her gesturing enthusiastically. She was exactly the kind of person I usually felt intimidated by. Polished, confident, clearly successful, surrounded by people who hung on her every word. But something about her energy was magnetic rather than intimidating, inclusive rather than exclusive. When the group around her dispersed, I found myself drifting in her direction almost unconsciously. Elena speaking. Hi, I don't think we've met. I'm Elena Martinez. I run a sustainable fashion startup downtown. What brings you here tonight? Jessica speaking. I'm Jessica. Jessica Chen. I'm a freelance graphic designer. Or trying to be one anyway. Still figuring it all out, honestly. Elena speaking. Aren't we all? I've been figuring it out for 3 years now, and I'm still not sure I know what I'm doing half the time. Sustainable fashion, that's my thing. Trying to change how people think about clothing and consumption and the environmental impact of the fashion industry. It's a tough sell sometimes, but I really believe in it. As she talked about her vision for her company, about wanting to prove that fashion could be both beautiful and ethical, about trying to build something that mattered beyond just profit margins, something clicked inside me. I found myself genuinely engaged for the first time in weeks, asking questions that weren't forced, offering ideas that came naturally, connecting with someone over shared values and complementary skills. Elena speaking. Wait, you're a designer? What kind of design do you do? Jessica speaking. Graphic design, mostly. Branding, logos, marketing materials, websites, that kind of thing. I'm still building my freelance business, so I'm taking on pretty much anything right now. Elena speaking. Oh my God, we desperately need a designer. Our current branding is honestly terrible. We threw it together when we first launched because we couldn't afford to hire anyone professional, and it shows in every single way possible. It's hurting us. I know it is. People judge the quality of your product by the quality of your presentation, and our presentation screams amateur hour. Would you be interested in pitching us something? We actually have a real budget now. Not much, but real money for real work. Would I be interested? This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been praying for, lying awake at night hoping for, working toward with every networking event and portfolio update and online course. A real client, with real needs and a real budget, and a mission I actually believed in. But even as excitement surged through me, that familiar voice of doubt whispered in my ear with all its usual venom. What if I mess it up? What if my designs aren't good enough? What if she hates everything I propose? What if this is my one real shot and I blow it completely? But then I thought about Theodore, that kind old man with the pale blue eyes who'd seen something in me worth investing in when I couldn't see anything in myself worth protecting. Who'd believed I deserved a chance even when I didn't believe it myself. Who'd spent his last day on Earth trying to give me hope. Who'd trusted me with everything. Jessica speaking. Yes. Absolutely yes. I'd love to pitch you some ideas. When would you like to meet? Landing that client changed everything, but not in the way I'd expected. Not because Elena's company was huge or because the project paid some enormous amount. It wasn't and it didn't. The project fee was modest, $5,000 for a complete rebrand, which seemed like a fortune to me but was actually quite reasonable for the amount of work involved. But what the project gave me was far more valuable than money. It proved something to me that I'd been struggling to believe for months. I could actually do this. My work was genuinely good enough to solve real problems for real businesses. I was good enough. The project with Elena took 3 months from start to finish. We met weekly at her small office downtown, a converted loft space she shared with another startup. I'd arrive with mock-ups and concepts, and we'd spend hours discussing her vision for the company, refining the designs, making sure everything aligned with her mission of sustainable fashion. I created a complete brand identity from scratch. A new logo that incorporated a stylized leaf intertwined with a needle and thread, capturing both the craft of fashion and the commitment to sustainability. Color palettes that felt fresh and natural, using earthy greens and warm neutrals instead of the harsh blacks and whites that dominated fashion branding. Typography that was clean and modern but with subtle organic touches that reinforced the sustainable message. I designed business cards, letterhead, shopping bags made from recycled paper, hang tags for the clothing that told customers about the ethical sourcing, marketing materials that didn't just sell clothes, but told stories about the artisans who made them, the sustainable materials used, the impact of choosing ethical fashion. Website designs that made the online shopping experience feel personal and meaningful rather than transactional. Every element worked together to communicate that this wasn't just another fashion brand, but a company with values and purpose. When I presented the final designs, Elena literally cried. Elena speaking, "This is exactly what I was hoping for. Better than I hoped for, honestly. You really understood what we're trying to do here. This isn't just pretty design, it's design that serves our mission. That's rare, Jessica. Really rare. Most designers just want to make something that looks good. You made something that means something." Her words meant more to me than she could have known. This was validation from someone who had no reason to be kind, who'd hired me based on merit, and was judging my work based on results, not pity or charity. When she posted about her rebranding on social media, tagging my new business account, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded in from other small business owners asking who'd done the design. Inquiries started coming in from other sustainable businesses, from startups who'd seen Elena's transformation and wanted something similar for themselves. More clients came after Elena, slowly at first, and then with increasing frequency as word spread and my portfolio grew stronger with each completed project. A farm-to-table restaurant called Harvest needed a complete menu redesign and new signage to match their philosophy of local seasonal ingredients. The owner, a chef named Marcus, who'd left a prestigious restaurant to start his own place, wanted branding that felt authentic and unpretentious. I spent days at the restaurant, photographing their food, talking to the chefs, learning about their suppliers, understanding the story they wanted to tell. The final designs incorporated hand-drawn illustrations of local farms where they sourced ingredients, seasonal menus that changed with what was available, a visual system that made their commitment to supporting local agriculture tangible and beautiful. Marcus speaking, "You made us look like who we want to be, professional but not stuffy. Serious about food but not taking ourselves too seriously. This is perfect." A real estate agent named Patricia wanted new marketing materials that would help her stand out in a crowded market. She was in her late 50s, had been selling homes for 20 years, but was struggling to compete with younger agents who dominated social media with their glossy photo shoots and aggressive marketing. She came to me discouraged, wondering if it was time to retire. Patricia speaking. I can't compete with these kids and their Instagram. I don't even understand half of what they're doing, but I'm good at my job. I know these neighborhoods. I care about my clients. I just need people to see that. I created a brand for her that emphasized her experience, her deep knowledge of the communities she served, her personal approach to finding homes for families. The materials I designed were elegant and professional, using warm colors and real photography that showed her actually working with clients, walking through neighborhoods, pointing out details in homes. Not the standard corporate headshots most agents used, but authentic images that conveyed competence and care. Her tagline became 20 years of turning houses into homes. Within 2 months of implementing the new branding, her business had increased by 40%. Patricia speaking. You gave me my confidence back. I was ready to quit, and now I'm busier than I've been in years. Thank you, Jessica. Really, thank you. A tech startup called Streamline needed everything from a logo to a complete visual identity system for their new app that helped small businesses manage their social media. This was my biggest project yet, with a budget of $20,000, and it terrified me. They had high expectations and a demanding timeline. The founders were 2 young men in their 20s who'd just secured venture capital funding and needed to launch in 3 months. I spent weeks researching their competitors, understanding their target audience, creating multiple concepts before settling on a direction. The final result used bold, energetic colors and playful illustrations to make technology feel approachable rather than intimidating. The app icon was simple but distinctive. The user interface was clean and intuitive. All the marketing materials worked together to communicate that social media management didn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. When they launched, the app was featured in several tech publications specifically because of its design. One reviewer wrote that Streamline had the most approachable, user-friendly interface in the business tools category. The founders sent me a bonus check and recommended me to 3 other startups in their network. Each project built on the last, teaching me something new about design, about business, about working with clients and managing expectations. I learned to ask better questions during initial consultations, to really listen to what clients needed versus what they thought they wanted. I learned when to push back on bad ideas and when to trust their instincts about their own businesses. I learned to price my work appropriately, to value my time and expertise without underselling myself. I learned that sometimes the best solution was simple and elegant, rather than complex and showy. My business grew throughout that spring and into summer, expanding in ways that felt both exciting and terrifying. I was working long hours again, just like at the diner, except now the exhaustion was entirely self-imposed, and somehow that made it worse. No one was making me work until midnight, perfecting the 5th revision of a logo design that was already good enough. No one forced me to take on more clients than I could comfortably handle. No one demanded that I respond to emails within 10 minutes at any hour of the day or night. I was doing it all to myself, driven by some deep, unexamined fear that if I slowed down even a little, if I ever said no to an opportunity, everything would disappear like it had never been real at all. It took a near breakdown in late July to make me see what I was doing to myself, to recognize the pattern I was trapped in. I was sitting in my home office at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night, working on my 5th major revision of a website layout for a client who couldn't articulate what they wanted, but definitely knew what they didn't want, when I caught sight of my reflection in the darkened window. The image stopped me cold. I looked exactly like I had at Ruby's Diner 6 months ago. Exhausted, hollow-eyed, running on fumes and desperation, trapped in an unsustainable cycle of overwork and anxiety. I'd been given this incredible gift, this once-in-a-lifetime chance at a better life, at freedom and possibility and hope, and I was systematically squandering it by recreating the exact same destructive patterns that had nearly destroyed me before. Theodore's words came back to me with perfect clarity, as if he was sitting right there in my office speaking them directly to me. Stop running yourself into the ground. Life is too short and too precious to spend it exhausted and hopeless. I closed my laptop without saving my work and went to bed, something I never would have done before. The client could wait until tomorrow. The project could wait. Everything could wait because I couldn't keep going like this without breaking completely. The next morning, after actually sleeping for 8 full hours for the first time in weeks, I made some hard but necessary decisions. I raised my rates significantly, which meant I could take on fewer clients without losing income and without sacrificing my financial stability. I set strict work hours, 9 to 6 on weekdays with an hour for lunch, and actually stuck to them even when clients pushed back. I started saying no to projects that didn't genuinely excite me, even if they paid well, even if turning them down felt like throwing away opportunities. I hired a part-time assistant, a recent design school graduate named Marcus who needed experience and seemed thrilled to handle all the administrative work I hated. I began treating my business like something sustainable and long-term, rather than something I had to prove every single day through suffering and exhaustion. And here's what I learned, what I discovered through that necessary recalibration. The work actually got better, significantly better. When I wasn't exhausted and stressed and running on anxiety and caffeine, my creativity flourished in ways it never could before. My designs were more innovative, more thoughtful, more carefully considered. I took risks I wouldn't have taken when I was too tired to think straight. Clients were happier with the results, which led to more referrals, which led to even better clients. And I was happier, genuinely happier, in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible for me. This was what Theodore had wanted for me, I realized one afternoon while sitting in my garden watching the roses bloom. Not just financial stability or professional success. He wanted me to have actual well-being, actual joy, the space to thrive instead of just survive. About a year after Theodore's death, on a crisp September morning that reminded me of the day we'd met, I received an envelope in the mail. The return address was from someone named Elizabeth Blackwell, and my hands shook as I opened it because I knew exactly who she was. Theodore's eldest daughter. My hands actually trembled as I unfolded the letter inside, terrified of what it might say, what accusations it might contain. Maybe she'd changed her mind about the inheritance after all. Maybe she was angry that a stranger had her father's house and his money. Maybe she wanted it all back and was going to take me to court. But the letter wasn't angry at all. It was sad and grateful, and so honest it made my chest ache. Elizabeth wrote about her father with a mixture of love and regret that was painful to read. She told me about the man he'd been before ambition consumed him entirely, before success became more important than family, before work became his entire identity at the expense of everything else. She described family dinners he'd missed because of meetings that couldn't wait, school plays he'd been too busy to attend, promises broken in pursuit of the next big deal that would make everything worthwhile somehow. She explained why she and her sisters had distanced themselves over the years, how love alone wasn't enough when it came wrapped in neglect and broken promises and endless disappointment. The letter included this paragraph that I've memorized completely. But I'm glad that at the end, he got it right. That he gave someone a chance at the kind of life he never figured out how to live himself, despite all his wealth and success. My father was absolutely brilliant at making money, at building an empire, at achieving everything he thought mattered. But he never learned to make a life, to be present, to value the things that actually make existence meaningful. I hope you do better with his gift than he did with his own life. I hope you build something beautiful with it, something sustainable, something that brings you actual joy. Something he would have been proud of if he'd ever learned how to be proud of the right things instead of just the profitable things. I cried reading that letter, sitting alone in my library surrounded by bookshelves I'd slowly been filling with actual books. I cried for Theodore and all the years he'd wasted chasing the wrong things. I cried for Elizabeth and her sisters, and all the pain of loving someone who couldn't or wouldn't love them back the way they needed. I cried for all the complicated relationships and missed opportunities and broken connections that haunt families everywhere. I cried for the grace of second chances and the tragedy of when they come too late to repair what's truly broken. I cried for the weight of trying to be worthy of someone's faith in you, especially someone who gave you everything and asked for nothing in return except that you use it well. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, right above my desk where I'd see it every single day. A reminder of what I was building and why it mattered. A reminder that Theodore had given me more than resources or opportunities. He'd given me permission. Permission to want more than mere survival. Permission to believe I deserved better than what I'd had. Permission to fail and try again and fail again and keep trying anyway, because that's what growth looks like. Permission to build a life instead of just getting through days. 2 years after that breakfast at Ruby's Diner, in September again when the leaves were just starting to turn, I stood in the same corner booth where Theodore had sat during his final morning. Rita had agreed to let me redesign the diner's branding pro bono, a way of giving back to the place that had kept me afloat during my darkest times, during those years when I thought I'd never be anything more than exhausted and hopeless. The new logo hung proudly above the register, bright and modern while still respecting the diner's vintage character and history. It made the whole place feel refreshed without losing what made it special. Rita speaking. "It's perfect, Jessica. Really perfect. You did such good work here. You should be proud." Jessica speaking. "We did good work. You gave me a chance when I desperately needed one." when I had nothing else. We've all been giving each other chances in different ways. That's how this works. That's what I've learned over these past 2 years. What I've come to understand about life and love and the way we move through this world. Life is fundamentally a series of chances given and received, of people reaching out to each other across the vast gulf of their separate struggles and somehow making connection despite everything. Theodore reached out to me when I was drowning. Elena gave me my first real client when I needed validation. Rita had given me a job when I was desperate and grieving and had nowhere else to turn. Elizabeth had released me from guilt with her generous letter that I didn't deserve. And now I was reaching out too, taking on interns who reminded me of myself at that age, mentoring young designers who needed someone to believe in them, trying to pay forward the grace I'd been given in whatever small ways I could manage. My business is genuinely thriving now, beyond anything I imagined possible 2 years ago. I have more work than I can handle alone, so I've brought on 2 full-time designers, Marcus, who started as my assistant, and a woman named Claire, who has talents I'll never possess. We're actually looking at expanding into a proper office space downtown, though part of me wants to keep everything here in the brownstone where it all began. The brownstone itself has been completely renovated over the past year, transformed into both my home and my studio space, with room for my growing team and all our equipment. I finished my degree online last spring, finally got that diploma that had been hanging over me for years. Not because I needed it anymore for career purposes, but because I wanted to prove to myself I could finish what I'd started. Because learning for its own sake, pursuing knowledge without immediate practical application, was a luxury I could finally afford in every sense of that word. But more than any external measure of success, more than the business or the house or the degree or the financial security, I'm happy. Actually, genuinely, sustainably happy. Not the manic happiness of someone running from pain or compensating for emptiness. Not the desperate false cheer I used to put on for customers at Ruby's, but the deep, steady, reliable contentment of someone who's found their place in the world and knows they belong there. I work hard. I'm not afraid of hard work and never will be, but not desperately anymore. Not frantically. I rest without guilt, taking entire weekends off sometimes just to do nothing productive at all. I invest in relationships instead of just surviving them or using them. I have actual hobbies now that serve no productive purpose beyond bringing me joy. I read for pleasure. I garden. I've taken up painting, badly but enthusiastically. I have friends, real friends, people I see regularly and talk to about things that matter. Sometimes, often really, I think about that morning at the diner, about Theodore sitting in that corner booth with his trembling hands wrapped around his coffee cup and his kind, sad eyes seeing something in me I couldn't see myself. I wonder what exactly he saw that morning that made him choose me out of all the possible recipients of his generosity, and his guilt, and his need for redemption. Was it really just that I reminded him of his daughter, or was it something else, something deeper, some recognition of shared weariness, of dreams deferred, of potential crushed under the weight of circumstances beyond our control? I'll never know for sure. I'll never have answers to those questions. But what I do know, what I understand now with complete certainty, is this. He gave me so much more than money or property or even opportunity. He gave me the most precious gift anyone can possibly receive from another human being. He gave me the belief that I deserved better than what I had, the belief that I mattered as a person beyond my utility or productivity. He saw my exhaustion and my hopelessness and said, without ever speaking the words directly, "You matter. Your dreams matter. Your life could be different. Your suffering doesn't have to be permanent. You deserve joy and rest and the chance to become who you're meant to be." And he was absolutely right. My life is different now, transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined on that September morning 2 years ago, when I was pouring coffee with shaking hands and counting down the hours until my shift ended. Different not just externally, not just in terms of circumstances or possessions or security, but internally too. I'm different, fundamentally changed in ways that can never be undone. I learned that survival isn't the same as living, that merely existing isn't enough, that we owe ourselves more than just getting through each day. I learned that accepting help isn't weakness, but wisdom, that we all need each other, that isolation and independence aren't virtues but survival mechanisms we adopt when we're hurt. I learned that second chances are real, that transformation is possible, that what we do with the gifts we're given matters more than almost anything else. The money will eventually run out if I'm not careful with it, despite my financial advisor's best efforts. The house could burn down tomorrow, could be destroyed by any number of disasters. My business could fail, could collapse under economic pressure, or my own mistakes, or simple bad luck. All the external things that changed my life, all the tangible evidence of Theodore's generosity, they're ultimately temporary, vulnerable to the chaos and entropy of existence. But what Theodore really gave me, what he fundamentally changed, that's permanent. The internal transformation, the shift in how I see myself and what I believe I deserve, that's mine forever. No one can take that away. No disaster can destroy it. It's woven into who I am now. I keep that photo on my desk still, the one Michael Harrington gave me when we first met. Theodore at maybe 40, young and vital and full of possibility, standing with his 3 daughters on some beach somewhere. They're all laughing, sunburned and happy, and he's holding the youngest one, maybe 3 years old, high above his head toward the bright blue sky. She's squealing with delight, her face full of absolute trust that her father will never let her fall. It's the father he could have been, should have been, wanted to be, before ambition and obsession and the pursuit of success pulled him away from what actually mattered. It's a reminder that it's never too late to get it right, even if getting it right means giving someone else the chance you never quite gave yourself. Every single morning without exception, I wake up in my beautiful house, in my comfortable bed surrounded by morning light from windows that don't face brick walls, and I take a long moment before starting my day. Before checking my phone or thinking about work or planning what needs to be done, I just lie there and think about Theodore, about that last morning of his life when he chose kindness over everything else he could have done with those final hours. I think about the intricate, impossible web of choices and chances and coincidences that brought us together for that one brief breakfast that changed everything. And I make a promise, the same promise I made him in that parking lot while tears streamed down my face. I promise to use his gift wisely, to build the life I deserve, to be worthy of his faith and his generosity. Because that's what love looks like sometimes in its purest form. Not grand romantic gestures or dramatic declarations or passionate speeches, but a stranger seeing your exhaustion, really seeing it, and deciding to ease it without expectation or demand. An old man at the end of his life reaching back to help someone at the beginning of theirs. A gift given absolutely freely, with no strings attached, with no expectation of gratitude or recognition or return, just the hope that somewhere, somehow, it might matter to someone. It did matter, Theodore. It matters more than you could ever have known. Your last act of generosity changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone my success allows me to help. Every designer I mentor, every client I serve, every person I encourage to pursue their dreams instead of just surviving, they're all part of your legacy now. You didn't just give me money or a house or opportunity. You gave me a chance at becoming the person I was always meant to be, but never had the space or resources or permission to become. Thank you, Theodore Blackwell, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for believing in me when I'd stopped believing years ago, for giving me the chance to discover that I was worth saving all along. I promise I'll keep trying to make you proud every single day. I'll keep building something beautiful from the ashes of what was. I'll keep reaching out to others the way you reached out to me. I'll keep spreading hope and kindness and second chances because that's what you taught me in our one brief meeting. That's the lesson worth learning, worth living, worth sharing. Because that's what we do for each other at our best, isn't it? We lift each other up. We support each other when support seems impossible. We believe in each other when belief requires faith beyond evidence. We give each other permission to dream bigger than mere survival, to want more than just getting through another day without collapsing. We remind each other that life is precious and impossibly short and worthy of being fully lived, not just endured. That's your legacy, Theodore. Not the buildings you constructed or the empire you built or the fortune you amassed, but the single life you transformed in your final hours. The faith you placed in a tired waitress who'd forgotten how to hope. The generosity you showed when nothing and no one required you to show it. The second chance you gave someone who desperately needed one and didn't know how to ask for it. I carry that with me always, in everything I do, in every design I create, every client I serve, every moment I consciously choose living over merely surviving. You're there in all of it. That kind old man who saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. Who decided that even at the end of everything, especially at the end, what matters most is how we treat each other, how we ease each other's burdens, how we pass along hope like a torch in the darkness, keeping the light going forward. Your final morning on this earth, you chose to matter in the most fundamental way possible. You reminded someone that they mattered too. And in doing so, you created ripples that will continue spreading outward long after both of us are gone. long after everyone who knew us directly has forgotten our names. That's real immortality, Theodore. Not in buildings or bank accounts or business success, but in the lives we touch and the hearts we change and the hope we inspire in others. That legacy continues forever, multiplying and spreading and transforming the world in small but meaningful ways. Thank you for my second chance at life. I won't waste it. I promise you that with everything I am and everything I'm still becoming,